pizza Coke thing, I don't think we've gone through it. Am I right? Something to that. We have another drawing over there. I like the one on the right better. Must be their own little art gallery studio. So I think I had kind of talked about the eating of pizza at the Super Bowl that day. And then I left it at this point on the next slide. And this was the amount of pizza, and then we added another, did I do this?
No.
I think I did. The other class I had gotten a little ahead. And from this side, these last three columns was a different item, Coke. Cups of Coke, and this was the slices of pizza on the first three. This is just a reproduction of what was on that small table on the previous slide. So I just reproduced that, and then I added another item. Well, what this exercise is about is choosing what to buy as a consumer with a limited amount of money, and that's why it's called a budget constraint. You have a limited amount of money on you, and you need to make a decision between slices of pizza and cups of Coke. Now, are you going to do this every day, like this, with a table and numbers? No, you're not going to do this, but you do it in your head. You do it in your head in some way. You have 20 bucks on you, and you got to decide where to go to eat lunch, and you decide because of the utility, the satisfaction, which one is going to give you the most. And so the way we do it here is using the rule of marginal utility per dollar. And we'll get to that here in a second. It's on the next slide, actually. But this is just the data, all right? This is just given data. You have the number of slices of pizza, 0 through 6, and total utility, and then the marginal utility from the last slice eaten. And the difference between the two is where you're getting the marginal utility. Okay, this 20 is the difference between these two. 16 is the difference between these two. So that's where the number came from. And over here, the cups of Coke, each cup of Coke you've consumed, 0 to 20, there's the difference there. 20 to 35, the difference there. That's the marginal utility, marginal satisfaction. All right, so from that data, we take and add we do one more step to it. We haven't given you this, but the price per item, you have to know this in order to solve it. So the price for pizza per slice was $2, or is going to be $2. And the price of a cup of Coke is $1. So now you know what the price per item is. And you have a budget constraint in mind. You have a certain amount of money in your pocket. I'm going to say it's $10. $10 in your pocket. So here's what you would do for the math of this. Again, in real life, you're not going to do this. You're not even going to know the numbers. You're just going to think in your head, this is what will give me the most satisfaction. But this is how you do it. You take the slices of pizza, which is what we had on the previous slide, 1 through 6. This was the marginal utility column. That was the column on the far right of the three. And you divide each of the marginal utilities by the price, which was $2. Okay, so you divide the marginal utility by $2. And that marginal utility per dollar, that's what this next column is out to here. So that's where that number is coming from. This is the marginal utility per dollar per item. So the first slice of pizza gives you 10 marginal utility per dollar units. I'm going to call it units. I actually call it utils. So you're converting the marginal utility to the marginal utility per dollar. That's all you're doing. And this is pizza on this side, and on the right side is the Coke. You're doing the same thing. Only difference is Coke is $1. So you're dividing by $1. And you're getting this number, okay? Divide it all the way down by 1, and you divide this all the way down by 2. You need this column in order to solve the problem, in order to decide how many items of each are you going to buy with the budget constraint in your pocket. So you have $10, and I kind of use a running total here. This is what you start out. This is your budget. Okay, so how much money you have. So what am I going to, how am I going to decide, make the consumer decision on what to purchase first? Well, the rule is this. You take the one, you choose the one with the highest marginal utility per dollar. Which, if you look at the table here, you look at the first cup of Coke and the first slice of pizza. Between the two, which one has the highest marginal utility per dollar? The cup of Coke. Because it had 20 units of marginal utility divided by $1, it gives you $20, 20 units of satisfaction per dollar. So it's more valuable to you, more satisfying to you. So you would choose the cup of Coke first. And when I do that, that's going to eliminate $1 from my pocket. So I keep a running total here. This will be the first cup of Coke. Now when I do this, I'm on paper, and you'll see a table like this on the test. I won't use pizza and Coke. I'll use two other items. I'll use bananas and apples or something. But what I like to do is cross it off. Okay, so that way I won't use it again. You don't get confused, you don't have it, it's not on the table anymore. So then the next choice, you've got $9 left, is to take, now you're going to compare the first slice of pizza and the second cup of Coke. Which one has the highest marginal utility per dollar?
The Coke again.
Still the cup of Coke. Makes no difference whether you're thirsty or hungry or anything like that. It has to do with the budget and the marginal utility per dollar. Somebody asked the other day, well, what if I'm hungry? Yeah, but your satisfaction is higher here. So again, just take the data the way it is. Don't try to read into it anyway. So you're going to take the second cup of Coke, and that's going to cost you another $1. That leaves you, now you got $8 in your pocket. Now again, like I said, I always like to just cross it off so I don't use it again. So I cross through it. And I've gotten 2 items now for $1 a piece, 2 cups of Coke. Now you get down to the third cup of Coke and the first slice of pizza. Now you'll notice they're the same. They each have marginal utility per dollar of 10. So in this case, when they're the same, you can choose either one. And since I haven't had a slice of pizza, I'm going to go ahead and choose that. If they're equal, which they are at 10, I'll go ahead and choose the slice of pizza and eat something.
So are we going by marginal utility or marginal
utility per dollar?
Wouldn't the pizza be 5 still?
Well, you're dividing it by 2, so that's 10.
Oh, okay.
You haven't eaten the first slice of
Got
pizza.
it.
Yeah, you always have to go back to what you haven't.
I was going up on the third one.
Yeah,
No,
me too.
no, you can't go. You got to go back. You haven't used this yet. You haven't eaten anything. That's why I like to cross them off, so you only take what you've used, or you take what you haven't used. Yes. So I'm going to take a slice of pizza, and this is going to cost me $2. And I got $6 left. Now I'm going to cross this one off, so I don't use it again. Now I want to compare the third cup of Coke and the second slice of pizza. Which one has the highest marginal utility per dollar?
Coke.
Coke. 10 is greater than the 8, so again I'll drink another cup of Coke. It's going to cost me $1. This will be the third cup of Coke, because again it's providing you more satisfaction per dollar. And I'll cross it off. I don't use it again. And now we're going to compare the second slice of pizza and the fourth cup of Coke. The second slice of pizza provides you 8 units of satisfaction per dollar. And the fourth cup of Coke gives you 5, so we're going to choose the pizza because it does provide more. It's going to cost me $2 the second slice. And I'm going to cross that off so I don't use it. Just remember, you're taking the highest marginal utility per dollar in each case. Now you've got another one where it's equal. 5 and 5, what you have left over. And it doesn't matter which one you take. I'm going to go ahead and take the third slice of pizza again. So it will cost me $2 more. This is going to work out evenly. Third slice of pizza cost me $2. I got $1 left. And if you do cross it off, you're going to see that the fourth cup of Coke is higher marginal utility per dollar than the fourth slice of pizza. So again, it works out evenly where I can choose that fourth cup of Coke. Cost me $1. And I have nothing left. And again, I just cross off the last one just for show. But so I've got the combination of goods. This is what the question will be on the test. How many pizzas and Coke would you choose with the given budget constraint? Now there are all kind of combinations you probably could come up with. You could eat 5 slices of pizza and that's it. But it wouldn't give you the highest marginal utility per dollar. Wouldn't give you the highest marginal satisfaction per dollar. So based on the data we have, we're going to choose 4 cups of Coke and 3 slices of pizza. And that would be our optimal number of each to satisfy our desires. On the test, you'll have a table like this. I may not give you this column. Okay? As a matter of fact, I don't even have to give you the marginal utility column. All I would need to give you is this. And you can solve it from there on. I would have to give you the price per item, pizza, Coke, each having $1 value. I'd have to give you that. But you could calculate the marginal utility, because if I give you this, total utility, let's say it's 10. If I gave you just that, you could tell me what marginal utility is. And then from the marginal utility, you could tell me what, this would be 8, this would be 6. From that, you can tell me what marginal utility per dollar is. I'll put P for price. Okay. So you're going to divide by the price of each item. So I wouldn't have to give you anything but these first 2 columns. Some students get a little miffed at that when I don't give you enough, but you can do it yourself. But I do have one on there. It does have a full table, I believe. And like I said, it's not pizza and Coke. I think it's apples and bananas or some combination or something. So it's not a hard exercise. It's just a matter of taking your time and making sure you do a little simple math, right, and then just choose from the highest marginal utility per dollar. The other way people can solve it is you can work backwards. There are 4 choices, right, in the answers, A, B, C, D. I guess you could do all 4 choices to see which one comes out the highest. All right. So that's that example. The next slide is, I think, just a summary of what has happened in different combinations. One slice of pizza and 3 cups of Coke is not going to be enough because we're only going to spend $5 in that example, in that combination. the 3 slices of pizza and 4 cups of Coke is the optimal number, because we do spend our $10. The one before, we only spent 5. Now over here, they give you the total utility. That was on the previous slide. You could actually tell me what the total utility is. 4 slices of pizza, 5 cups of Coke, we can't get that. We can't do that, we don't have $13 in our pocket. So that's just a couple of different other combinations to choose from. All right, now we're gonna shift gears. This is the second half of the notes. The first part was about utility. The second part of this chapter is on surplus. Surplus both from the consumer standpoint and from the producer. What is consumer surplus? Now, consumer surplus is kind of extends a little bit of the discussion on the demand curve, what demand is. The law of demand is, okay, we know that as the price rises, the quantity demanded falls. Inverse relationship. But the surplus is the amount that you benefit by paying a lower price. So what this part of the definition here is a consumer's willingness to pay, and we talked about that phrase before, willing to pay for a good is the maximum price at which he or she would buy that good. And an individual's consumer surplus is the net gain or benefit to the buyer from the purchase of the good. It is equal to the difference between what you're willing to pay and the actual price you paid. So if you're willing to pay, say you get some item out there that you want to buy, you're willing to, you've got money to set aside, you're willing to pay $500 for an iPad, but you actually paid $400. What's the difference? $100. You benefited by. That's called the surplus. You were willing to pay in your mind $500, but you got a discount, or you chose a different brand, not brand, but a different storage. Maybe one didn't have 32 gigs, the other one had 16 gig. Ended up being 400. Or an mini iPad. I don't know how much they are, but they're somewhere around that price. So you gained there. You benefited. Now, do you actually pocket that? Well, you do in a way. You saved that $100. You didn't have to spend the extra. You were willing to pay that, but you didn't pay it. So you gained $100, the difference. So there's a lot of ways in which you can discuss consumer surplus. Sometimes there's not a known price that you're willing to pay. I'm actually looking for a vehicle, but I'm willing to do something per month, like a monthly payment. Maybe you're willing to pay $300 for a monthly payment, and you can't go any. But what if you get the car and you get the monthly payment at $250? So you gain $50 a month. It's a surplus to you. Again, you didn't have the money, but you just had a budget in mind of what you wanted to spend per month. All right, here's an example from used textbooks. This is actually a demand-looking curve. It's like a stair-step look, but it does have, if you wanted to, plot it and put the points on the end here, and then plot the line, you could do that. But it's kind of like a demand curve for used textbooks. Alicia is willing to pay $59 for one. Brad, 45, Claudia, 35, Darren, 25, 10 for Edwina. What if the price was 30 for a textbook? What if it was right in here? Who would be willing to pay that price? Who would get that textbook?
Claudia, Brad, and Alicia.
The top three, right? Alicia, Brad, and Claudia. They're all willing to pay higher than the 30. They would benefit. So if this was the price, Claudia's surplus would be $5 because she's only willing to pay $35 for the used textbook, but she gets it for $30. So she got a benefit of $5, a surplus. Brad, he's willing to pay 45, he gets a $15. And Alicia, difference there is 29, okay? Darren and Weena do not even get the book. They're not willing to pay $30 at all. They're out of the market. Okay, they just have decided I'm not willing to spend $30 for the book. So they don't get any surplus at all. Now the actual surplus graphically looks like, this changes the example, by the way. I wish I could have had the same one with textbook. The actual graphical look of it, a surplus, is this. This is a number of computers. This changes the example, but it's the price and quantity. At 15, let's say that the total surplus there, consumer, is generated by purchases of a good at a given price is equal to the area below the demand curve but above that price. So let's say that, well, let's say the price is $1,500, and that up here, let's say it was $3,000. I'll just throw out a number. And that triangle there, the blue shaded triangle, is the actual consumer surplus. Now, some instructors I have in the past heard that said they want you to calculate the area of that triangle. I don't want you to do that, I don't care. It's not that important. I just want you to be able to recognize that the surplus to a consumer is that amount underneath the demand curve and above the price, the little triangle there. Now, what if the price ended up rising up to, say, 2,000? Let's say the price rose to 2,000. And at 2,000, only maybe 800,000 computers were sold. What happens to the consumer surplus? This little area right in here gets eliminated. This consumer surplus now is a smaller triangle. That area right there. It's still a triangle, but since its price has gone up, the gap now has shrunk, and now that triangle is much smaller. Again, I'm not going to have you calculate the area of a triangle, but it's smaller now than it was before because the price is higher. So when the price rises, surplus falls to the consumer, which would be the opposite to the producer. The producer, we haven't talked about that yet, but the producer, if the price rises, he gets more surplus. The person selling than the buyer, because they're gaining another $500 per, well, not per, but $500 in the price of an item. This is kind of what I was just talking about. A fall in the price of a good, this is the opposite actually, increases consumer surplus through two channels. A gain to consumers who would have bought at the original price, and a gain to consumers who are persuaded to buy by the lower price. Now we actually went the other way. We went to a higher price. Let me go back. So it's a gain to the consumers who would have bought at the original price. I think there's a picture of this. Maybe it's the next slide. Let's see, there it is. Yes. Okay, yeah. So here it is. What that previous slide was explaining. A fall in the market price increases consumer surplus. So the price fell per computer from 5,000 to 1,500. This triangular area, this entire amount is all the surplus, all of it. But this little new blue shaded area is the surplus gained by the new buyers. Because you go from 200,000 buyers to a million buyers, and those are the people who are going to buy at 1,500. They're not going to buy at 5,000, but an additional 800,000 people are going to buy at that lower price. So that's a surplus gained by those new buyers. Then this is the increase in surplus to the original buyers. The original buyers were willing to pay 5,000, and only 200,000 of them were really willing to do that. Now they're going to benefit even an additional rectangular area because they only pay 1,500. The original consumer surplus is the little, it's this little triangular area right here. That's the original consumer surplus. But then when the price went down, man, we got a bigger triangle. Surplus to consumers was increased greatly. And the opposite occurs when the price rises. Consumer surplus falls. When price falls, consumer surplus increases. All right, now the opposite of consumer surplus, or the other side of the spectrum, is the seller, the producer. The producer gains too. They benefit, just the opposite. It's a little bit different way to think. It's the potential seller's cost is the lowest price at which he or she is willing to sell the good. Not willing to pay, but willing to accept. So if I'm selling computers, I'm willing to accept $500 because that's my cost. I have $500 in cost in it. I got to get $500 out of it to make money. So that's what I'm willing to accept. It's the net gain to the seller for selling a good. It is equal to the difference between the price received, so whatever they get, and your cost, or what you're willing to accept. So if you received $1,000 for the computer and your costs were $500, the seller benefited by $500. They got a producer surplus. They gained there. So it's what the difference between what you receive, price you receive, and what you have in it, seller's cost, or what you're willing to accept. Total producer surplus in the market is the sum of the individual producer surpluses of all the sellers of the good. Now here's the opposite looking graph. This is the supply graph for used textbooks, and there's 5 different people here who are willing to accept a certain price for the book. Andrew, Betty, Carlos, Donna, and Engelbert. Andrew's willing to accept $5 for the textbook as a seller. Betty's willing to accept $15, Carlos $25, Donna $35, etc. Now what if that price is $30 again? Who is going to sell the good?
Carlos, Betty, and
Carlos, Betty, and Andrew, the 3 on the below the 30. Carlos is willing to accept 25. He gets 30, so he gets a $5 surplus. Betty's willing to sell at 15. The difference there is 15. 5, the difference is 25. Donna's not willing to sell unless she sells it for 35. If the price is 30, she gets no benefit. There's no gain there. And Engelbert is likewise the same. He's only willing to accept $45. And so the graph, if this is a supply curve, the graph is going to be a little triangular area above the supply curve and below the price received. That's the next slide. So there's a little shaded area right there. This is a different example. This is the bushels of wheat. Price is $5. At $5, they sell 1 million. And if the cost, say, was $1, this would be a $4 surplus to the producer. He's willing to accept $1 at its lowest price, its cost, but he got 5 received. Now again, when the price dropped or increased, you see that this triangle will either get smaller, it'll shrink, or it'll expand, get bigger. So the surplus will get larger. And the next one, how changing prices affect the producer surplus through 2 channels. When the price of the good rises, producer surplus increases. The gains of those who would have supplied the good even at the original lower price, and the gains of those who are induced to supply the good by the higher price. Those who now have an incentive to sell at the higher price. And that's the next slide, the picture of this. It goes up to $7 for a bushel of wheat. So that increase from 5 to 7 was the increase in the original sellers. This little triangular area is what, because there's 1 million of those at 5, And because it went to 7, they gained another, not triangle, rectangular area there, that additional producer surplus. Then this little triangular area is the additional surplus gained from the new sellers. There's another 500,000 here of new sellers at $7 price, so there's more surplus by those new sellers on the market for wheat. The entire surplus is the entire triangle, the entire amount. Now, what is total surplus? Total surplus is really the sum of both of them together. The surplus in the market is the total net gain to consumers and producers from trading in the market. It's the sum of the producer and it's the sum of the consumer surplus. It says these concepts can help us understand why markets are an effective way to organize economic activity. Now here's a picture of what I just said. The two together, you get the two curves intersecting now together. Equilibrium for books, $30, textbook, 1,000 of them are sold. Consumers get this much benefit, producers get this much. So it's basically the area underneath the demand curve and to the price, and for producer surplus, it's the area above the supply curve and to the price. The entire area is called total surplus, or sometimes in some books it's called economic surplus. So I just want to throw that word out there too. Like, generally it's referred to as total surplus. It's the sum of both of them together. Now, I don't have a lot of questions on this part of this section of the slides. I got a couple, I put it in a graph. Just an understanding of what surplus is from both sides. On the consumer side, it's the amount, the difference between what you're willing to pay and the price. And the producer side is what they're willing to accept and the price they receive. Now, the last slide is a little bit about the role of time in demand. And I believe when I put this in, this was in your notes in chapter 6. Let's see here. Chapter 6. You skipped. There's a role of time.
Page 93.
Yeah, 93. There's some sentences in here that help. You're willing to pay a premium for for time-saving goods and services depends on the opportunity cost of your time. So how much are you having to give up if you're willing to pay a little more? Oh, it was Disney World, I believe. Just inside the gates at Disneyland, Disney World, and Universal are boards listing the waiting times of each attraction and ride. At that point, the dollar cost of admission has already been paid, so the marginal cost of each ride and attraction is zero. You're not getting any more satisfaction. You've already paid for admission. The waiting times offer a menu of the marginal time cost of each ride or attraction. People willing to pay up to $55 an hour at Disney World and $60 an hour at Disneyland, plus the price of admission, until recently could take VIP tours that bypass the line. And at Universal, you can still pay extra for a pass to the front of the line. How much would you pay to avoid the lines? I haven't been to either park in a while. Do they have this feature where I guess you can pay extra to kind of get beyond all the waiting times? Okay, so there you go. You're willing to pay for the opportunity cost of having to wait. You're giving up too much. You say, oh heck, I'll pay the extra $20. Is that how much it is? Is it extra 50? Anybody know? 35 to get the extra little benefit. So, yeah, I mean, if you're willing to do that, It does mention a little bit about how the working couple tends to ignore coupons. I'm not so sure about that one, but and then the retired couple, they're more inclined to drive to a destination for vacation, whereas the working couple flies. I'm not so sure about that one either, because when you've got children, sometimes that your budget can't allow you to have people fly, 4, 5, 6 travelers flying. So anyhow, time does play a role in how much time you might have to give up for demand. And that was just a little bit the last of that chapter. All right, I did put up the slides to the next series about 8:30 last night, I think it was. At least I got an update before. And I want to go ahead and start those. We will spend a day or two, maybe it's actually in the next week for this. This is chapter 7. What did I call this? Production. There's 28 slides on this one. I think this is it, right? I had 2 sets of these, one for my night class and one for a day class. I think this is one for you guys, for the day class. Night class had a little different, last fall had a little different timing, so I had to change a little bit. All right, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this today because we do have plenty of time for Wednesday and next week. Our test, I believe, is the following week. Not next week, but I believe that week of the 24th, something like that, February 24th. So we've got some time, and it'll be over chapters 5, 6, and 7. Those are the 3 chapters. But this chapter is a very important chapter. It really starts to get into the difference between the course macro and micro. This is actually micro stuff. So is elasticity, and so is the surplus stuff. But this really gets into how those differences are about corporations and businesses, and we start to talk about cost. We will put that together with revenues and come up with profits. So I kind of titled this as profits, production function, and cost, because typically those are the things we discuss. I do have a separate series of slides that deals with the revenue, and I think it's the next set of slides. But here are some things in this series, in this set we're going to talk about. We're going to distinguish between the economic short run and the economic long run. I think we alluded to it a little bit with elasticity at the very end of those notes. What was the difference between short run and long run? Depending on the business that you have. If it's a mom and pop restaurant, the long run might be 6 months. What the long run means is that you can change everything in business. All costs are changeable. That's not the word, but variable. All costs can be changed. All expenses, all inputs. But in a small mom and pop restaurant, you may be able to do that in 6 months, maybe a year. But what about a car manufacturer? Might not be able to change things as easily there in a year. Might be a little bit longer time horizon. Might be 3 years. I know computers and technology make this a little shorter than they used to be. Cars are redesigned a lot quicker than they were. They used to be on like a 5 or 6 year schedule to get an upgrade and a redesign. Heck, they're coming out 2-3 years and there's something different to them. think the Civic was just redesigned for the Honda, and now it's got another redesign, I believe. So there's all kind of things that come out, but because of technology, because of computerization, the ability to use automation to get products to the market quicker. Of course, in technology, with things like iPads and tablets, they're redesigned all the time. It seems like they're coming out with something new. Understand the relationship between marginal product of labor and the average product of labor. Now, that'll be in the discussion of the production function. Explain and illustrate the relationship between marginal cost and average total cost. We're going to go through a whole group of costs, starting with fixed costs, variable costs. If you've had accounting, maybe this is something familiar with you. But in accounting, I don't think you did graphs, right? You just did the calculation. That was it. But in here, we're going to put graphs together. And these are graphs you haven't seen. You haven't seen these graphs before. The graph you've seen typically has been supply and demand curve. And that's the one. But this is going to be different looking graphs. They're going to be U-shaped looking graphs. Graph average total cost, variable cost, all those will be those U-shaped curves. Understand how firms use the long run average total cost curve to plan for the future. One of the ways to describe this is looking at when you open a business, you're small, generally. You start out small. Maybe you open up one store. Then you expand. And so you need to understand your long run costs over a period of years and size, the scale of your operations. And that's called economies of scale. And that's also mentioned in the notes at the end. So those are the things in this chapter that we're going to discuss. The first slide is, why do we study the behavior of firms? Well, the first is to gain a better understanding of the decisions made by those producers, the sellers, the companies. We're going to gain a better understanding. We know the behavior that they exhibit. Starting with the next chapter, not this one, but the next chapter, there are 4 market structures. Perfect competition, monopoly, I think this is the order that the book goes. Monopolistic competition, and oligopoly. Those are the 4 basic market structures in the economy. Perfect competition is the ideal world. Where there's many buyers, many sellers, there's no influence on price, all the basic characteristics of markets. And with monopolies, things change a little bit. With oligopolies, things are different. Airlines are an oligopoly, airline industry. We're going to study how the behavior of the firm depends on the structure of the market. So if you're an oligopolist, like an airline, they got a different behavior. When one lowers their airfare, what's the other one going to do? They're going to lower too. There's not that many firms in the airline industry providing air travel. I don't know, maybe 8, 10 in America. Okay, just count. Just think of the airlines as you travel with, and so you don't have that many. So if one comes out with an airfare drop tomorrow, well, you can bet the rest of them are probably going to follow pretty quickly. They don't want to get left behind. So that's kind of the behavior that those firms will exhibit. Now, if one raises their prices or fares, the others are going to raise it with them. They're going to go with them. They kind of follow each other's lead. The economic purpose of the firm is to maximize profits. And just real quick, without too much, profits are revenues minus cost. Okay, or sometimes I put expenses. And if the number is positive, obviously it's a profit. If it's negative, it's a loss. But our goal, purpose, is to maximize profits. And throughout the next 3 or 4 chapters, it's still going to exist, and we're going to try to maximize those profits. We're not going to talk too much about it. Well, we'll get into a little bit of accounting, with some basic equations. like this one. This is pretty basic, it's back to your income statement. But we're not gonna talk about how to put debits here, credits here, nothing like that. That's accounting, that's financial accounting. The accountant and the economist do kind of relate to each other, but they have different ways and different ways that they recognize profits. And I believe the next slide gets into that, but I want to hold off. So I want to stop here for today, and we'll pick up this on Wednesday.